So I'm here today with Maurice, who's just written a new book, Let the Rock Miles Roll. It's a story of traveling around iconic parts of the United States in search for the elixir of life, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but maybe only one of those things. Maurice, welcome here.
Thank you for having me, Peter.
Now, you're not an American citizen, are you? What
No,
called you to this? You might give us a little background about the other book, actually, and
well,
your passion, really.
I'm Greek, born in Athens, and since my early teens, I was born in '58. So around when I was 12 years of age, I bought my first album. I went to a record store with my mother, and she bought a classical music record, which was the only kind of music played at home. And I thought I'd find something for me apart from classical music, and I bought Abbey Road,
Ah, okay.
and that was the first record I bought. And then I got immersed in this music. Now you have to remember that at this period, Greece was run by a military dictatorship. So this kind of culture was a bit not off limits, but it wasn't encouraged, let's say. So it was a
I
kind.
think that probably encourages some people to try and hunt it down, which is what you
Yes,
did.
yes. I mean, movies like Woodstock or the Strawberry Statement, that they were either censored or played in the cinemas, and after 2 days, taken down. So, for Greek youngsters, you know, rock pop music, whatever you want to call it, was something more than music. So I got really hooked on this since an early age, and I started listening to music, uh, let's say, in the early '70s, and I'm still listening to it. I developed an interest of looking deeper into it. Um, I don't know, since the '80s maybe, because in the '80s I was studying. I was doing postgraduate studies in England, in Colchester, in Essex, and that was it was a chance for me. Apart from studying, I mean, studying to a different place. Um, it was a chance for me to see all the concerts I haven't seen in Athens, because Athens, up until let's say the '70s or '80s, was off limits for bands. Not because there was a problem, but because it was far away. The market was small, so it was probably economically unfeasible to come to Athens. Speaking of which, on this Saturday I'm going to watch Tom Jones play Athens, which is something I never believed I would do. Um, I mean, having watched all the concerts, seen all the programs, I started developing an interest in researching this music. Where did it come from? How did it come from? And this thing, went on and on until the early 2000s. Um, while I mean, at the same time, I was doing uh, a very demanding job. I was in marketing and communication. I was in advertising. So this music was my exit from my everyday life. And at the same time, I started looking up all kinds of sources to start building an archive of information.
Well, that's what comes across really strongly in this book of just how well researched this is.
Thank you.
And particularly when you mention the 1970s. By the way, we were both born in 1958. That's a good, it's along with Prince and Madonna, by the way. But
I
um,
was born. I was born on the same day as Prince, actually,
oh, really?
7 June '58. Yeah,
Okay, you're a few years younger than me. That's it.
yeah.
A few months younger than me. Yeah, so it's really well researched, and it's both from a sort of academic viewpoint and on the ground. It's really the you went and did it. And what's remarkable, I think, is you mentioned the sort of cultural context in the 1970s of you had the air base broadcasting music, and that was it. It wasn't quite so bad in this country, but we were fed pop music, and we had to go to Radio Caroline to listen to the good stuff, but not
That's
quite as bad as in Greece. We didn't have a military dictatorship at the time. Uh, Wait and see. Anyway, so anyway, moving on then. So you actually went round a sort of fairly tight circle of towns in cities in the US, from Tennessee to other places. I mean, and you went to all these places that where all these fantastic things happen. I don't know where to begin. I
Well,
mean,
basically, I'll help you going a bit back. In
hmm,
2008, I published my first book,
yeah,
which was called "Let the Rock Stories Roll," and it was a trip in the musical landmarks of London. So my first book was it was kind of a journey. The journey of my musical education was sort of crystallized in my books. So the first book was on the birth and evolution of rock and roll in London,
hmm,
because when I first started listening to music, most of the music I was listening to was English bands and mostly progressive bands. And then as time went on and as punk came, I started looking more into the roots of this music and going back to the basics. And then, in conjunction with the fact that I saw uh, a few great blues concerts, I started going back into music and into history, and trying to find where this thing came about. So a few years after my trips to London, um, I went to the American South. So I decided to cover a quadrilateral. I hope the word is pronounced correctly. Of four basic hubs located in four different states. So the main one was Memphis in Tennessee, but I also went to that was my base. But I also went to Muscle Shoals in Alabama, um, where they had all these they still have all these great studios.
hmm.
Then I went to Helena, Arkansas, where they had the KFFA radio station, which was one of the first stations broadcasting live uh, music. And I also went to Mississippi. I went to Clarksdale and Tutwiler, which is the area where the blues was born.
Hmm.
Uh, so Clarksdale is much more developed in that sense, musically and touristically. Tutwiler is much less, but it has a couple of areas which are really very, very interesting to see. Um, they actually have the train station, the remains of the train station where W.C. Handy heard the blues for the first time in 1903.
And
Uh,
I've got a copy of the book still here because we met quite a few years later in Greece, didn't we? But this is the power of networking. While we're sitting here today, is because we met in Greece, didn't we?
that's right, and you have my first book, which is
Yeah.
unfortunately sold read to you.
Mm. So I do remember the punk stuff and all of that out of it, and I'll put a link in the video to that as well if people want to get hold of it. But anyway, well, I have to say, if I had my way with this interview, I'd start with Muscle Shoals on the basis that it was such an interesting fermenting pot for, sort of the bands that went there. The Rolling Stones obviously went there more famously, but it wasn't just about that. I mean, these are all located in what you could call redneck country in the
That's
States,
right.
really. So tell us a little bit about that trip, really.
Well, it was a day trip, and it was divided between the Alabama Music Hall of Fame, which is in Tuscumbia, and it's a very good collection of artifacts there. You can see most of well, all of the Alabama born musicians, but also some others who were not born there but had their careers in Alabama. You have you have instruments from various studios, all the hardware from the Swampers. You
I should add at this point that the book is beautifully illustrated with photographs you've taken
Thank you.
everywhere. I mean, that itself is a joy. And you then have to go into the text to see what it was all about. But I mean, it's
Yes,
beautifully illustrated.
yes, and I have to thank in public the organizations which permitted me to use those pictures, those photos I took when I visited those establishments, because you know, to some people it might seem natural. Okay, I pay a ticket, I get a picture, I can use it. No, if it's for a commercial reason, you can't. You have to have a permission. So I did, and most of them were very helpful actually, and a couple of them even sent me better pictures than the ones I had. So the Alabama Music Hall of Fame was the first stop, and then I went to Fame Studios. I went to 3614 Jackson Highway, which is the old Muscle Shoals sound studio, and the its continuation, which is called Cypress Moon Studios, and all these are located in a very short distance from each other, and it's amazing, as you said, in the middle of nowhere. You have three, four studios that really produced a huge amount of music, as was the case with the American Sound Studios in Memphis, which unfortunately, unless I'm not mistaken, maybe they built it again, as they did with Stax. But when I went there, it was just raised ground. There was nothing, and this studio in the late '60s, I think, had songs in the top 10 every week.
Yeah,
So
I think yes, I remember you've listed some of the greatest Stax records and all. There are little sort of plates, I guess, of stuff that came out of these places, which is amazing to go back to and think, how did they do that?
the Stax Museum is great. They actually it was again raised to the ground. It was sold for $1, I think, to some to a church, and then they decided to build it again. So they rebuilt the studio as it was, and they added a museum part around it. Um, and you have all the everything you need to know about Stax is there. They have the instruments of the MGs. They have all the gold records. They have everything. It's a great place to go. I mean, even if you're not a music buff like we are, it's
Mhm.
still interesting to go
Yeah,
because they're very well made museums. And being English, the importance of uh, doing a museum in an interesting way, which will attract people who will have a good time, regardless if they're very interested in the subject or not. And you have to make a museum which is accessible and likable by both the kids and the parents, even if
absolutely,
your target group is the parents. Um,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah. So yeah, all these places were a revelation and a kind of coming home for me, because all this music was uh, transferred to me via the airwaves, via the records, via the CDs, and having the chance to go and see the place where they were born is something else.
completely different than doing it from a spreadsheet or in an institution. So actually, you talk a lot about the birthplace of or the birth of the blues in there, but this was not an easy birth because it was a radical. There was a radical opposition to all of this. I mean, coon music is part of that, and you talk about that. But say something about the sort of the emergence of the blues then, because that's beyond music; it's culture, isn't it? And or
Yes,
counterculture in this
it,
case.
it was a way of communication for the black people
Mm.
in the years of slavery, because they were basically imported from Africa in masses. and there were slaves, so they had to communicate. So one way of communicating was gospel music, which was the music of God. So that was okay. And the other one was blues music, which was born in the fields, and it wasn't okay even for some blacks, because it was considered to be the music of the devil, which was talking of other things, more earthly, more forbidden. Whereas in gospel you were just praying to God and hoping for a better future. In
Mm.
blues you had to deal with everyday life and try to uh, you know uh, crystallize it, for the present, and put it in a different context so that you can live the day. Um, and Yeah, it was born in the fields. Then some people started playing it, and they added instruments to it. Um, and from the early 30s, I think, if I remember correctly, because of the industrialization of agriculture, many blues people, many black people, left uh, their fields and they went north to search for a better job, or for a job because they didn't have a job anymore. Uh, so these people going to St. Louis and Chicago formed the basis of the electric blues, because when you're in the fields, you can have an acoustic guitar and be easily heard. When you're in a club in Chicago, where when you're busking in a street, you can't be heard. So they had to put amplification, and that's how the electric blues was born. And also there were some white people who were really helpful in all this evolution of this music, because um, we had the Lomaxes, father and son, who went and recorded all these people, and they put them on shellac. They went to the fields, they went to their farms, and they recorded many of those people. Um, and Then obviously we had the development of this music when it started to make sense commercially, uh, because black people listened to R&B, as they called it. They listened to it since the early 30s and 40s, and then suddenly it was discovered that this music was also being heard by white people, because with with the radio and the records, you couldn't segregate the music uh, as efficiently. So I think a lady, a professor, I think Portia Molesby, said that you can segregate the airwaves. Um, so they started listening to it, and they discovered that um, more, more and more white people started listening to R&B. And when the Elvis phenomenon came, which I described thoroughly in the book, which was basically a hybrid. His first record was a hybrid of blues and country.
Mm.
He played a blues song with a country style, um, and that was rock and roll. That was the music that came as a heat wave, and engulfed, after a while, the whole country and the whole planet. Elvis was the catalyst. We have to say that.
So just staying on this for a moment, and I don't want to put too much of myself into this interview, but you have reminded me of when I traveled for work to Kansas years ago to do some project management work with a company. I won't name them, but I arrived on the day at lunchtime to do the work, and I was a bit sort of slightly yeah hungover with the flight.
The jet
But
lag.
I decided to take a CD player with me, and the company had just been served notice they were all going to be sacked because they'd been taken over. So it wasn't a good time for them. So I arrived to find out they'd all been put under notice on the Friday. I arrived on the Monday. But anyway, I carried on with the project management work anyway, and I got this player, and I while I was waiting to start, I put a couple of ZZ Top records on because I'd thought it out where we were in Kansas. And I saw a few, and they were all sort of huge beards. I think they all had motorbikes. I see one or two of them sort of moving. And then we got started, and I cracked a few jokes to break the ice. And then at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there was one woman who was a chemist, and she came up to me and she said, "I like really a lot what you're doing with this music, putting it on in the breaks." She said, "It's fantastic. I know, I see what you're doing," she said. But be careful," she said, "because you know where we are." I said, "I do." And you put Jimi Hendrix on. And I said, if you start going down muddy waters and other avenues, you will be, they will turn on you. And I turned around to her, I said, "That's fine." I said, "I understand that." I said, "Do remember that Jimi Hendrix was white." And she went, "Ah, yes, I see." So coming back to this cultural context, this was revolution, really. It started in the fields, what have you, but then got picked up and amplified, literally amplified, when the technology became available and adopted by some white guys. And of course, that's how things diffuse, isn't it, really, into existence. It didn't require the white guys to do it, but it probably helped.
No, and also part in this played the fact that some of the first people who discovered blues musicians and saw the opportunity who were Jewish entrepreneurs, American Jewish entrepreneurs from refugee families who were sort of second-class citizens closer to the blacks. So they were in a position to get to know them and hang out with them and then see the opportunities. People like the Chess Brothers, like Jerry Wexler. People who really had a very big contribution to the development of this music. But also the fact that you had people in states where it was difficult to do so. You had people, blacks and whites, playing together, which was, it was against the law to be together, and they did, like Booker T and the MGs.
Yeah.
And other cases, the Swampers as well. You had people coming from the north to play in Alabama, and when Wilson Pickett got off the plane and was greeted by Rick Hall, he saw people, in the fields, working on cotton, black people, and he said, "Well, what is this? I'm going back to New York." He freaked. But yeah, it was, you know, part of the development in this music had to do with the blending of cultures and the blending of people who were not supposed to blend together. And this was one of the most interesting and great things about this music.
And much of what you write about is almost taken for granted now, but it was certainly not taken for granted then. I
No,
mean, so that these are outrages. I mean, look at George Clinton forming a cross-cultural band. I know you don't cover that, but I mean,
no.
all of these cross-cultural moves are very important. And as an aside, I predict that there may be a resurgence of the blues under Donald Trump, because it is a cathartic mechanism to release pain and concern and angst and all the other things. I'm joking, of course, about the resurgence of the blues, but there we go. So, what else can you tell me about the book?
Well, what was going to say about the book? It was great fun doing it.
Mhm.
It was really nice, uh, you know, getting help from people I didn't know on the street. Um, you know, whether it was finding a place or whether it was, getting a picture. Um, Actually, the same was in England when I did my first book. I have to say this: I was in Richmond, and was trying to find the Crawdaddy Club, uh, which was in the old Station Hotel, I think. And I went to a pub um, opposite. It was opposite the Crawdaddy Club, and I went to a pub because I couldn't find the sign or something. And I said, I'm looking for the Crawdaddy Club. He said, it's right across and so on. I said, okay, because I went there and couldn't find it. He said, "Hold on," and he left the bar. The barman, he left the bar of the pub. Obviously, there were other people working there as well. He wasn't alone, but he left the pub and went out with me to show me exactly where the Crawdaddy club was. And you know, this says a lot about how people value the cultural establishment that they have literally next to their door, and
And it is
how
actually
to help. Yeah.
it's a very optimistic thought that there is still the triumph of the human spirit in the world. Yeah.
Yes. You can still get it. Obviously, in most countries, things are getting I don't know, more ugly, uh, more me kind of thing. More selfish, more aggressive. I don't know, but you always have those moments where you become optimistic. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I think it was Immanuel Kant that said music is the language of the emotions, or was it Madonna? I'm never quite sure. But I mean, so, how can people get hold of this book then, Maurice?
Well, it's on Amazon Kindle. It's an ebook. It's on Amazon Kindle.
Oh, ebook as well.
No, it's ebook only.
Oh, okay.
It's
Okay.
ebook only. It's on Amazon Kindle, and it's out there. I believe the Kindle application is for free, so people
Hmm.
who don't have it can very easily get it. And it's the price is something like over $10. Uh, and for people who listen to us and want to get hold of it and will get hold of it, I hope they like it, as you did.
And I mean, are you available for bar mitzvahs and weddings to talk about it as well?
Why not?
Why
Why
not?
not? Yeah, they all count.
Uh, well, from wherever you're going to do it, Maurice. That's
Yeah,
perfect.
that's
Thank
right.
you very much for this. It's absolutely brilliant, this book. It's a
Thank,
beautifully illustrated, beautifully researched, a long time in the making, but nonetheless worth the wait. So thank you so much for this.
thank you, Peter. Thank you for having me.